Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the May 23rd, 2012 Pittsburgh Board of Public Education Legislative Meeting. Before we begin this evening, I'd like to remind everyone to turn off their cell phones and pagers or put them on vibrate. Would everyone please rise so we can say the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. As is our tradition and procedure before the legislative meeting, we would like to recognize students and employees of the Pittsburgh Public School District. I'd like to ask board members to please come to the front, and I will turn this portion of the meeting over to Ms. Heather Hobson.
At Pittsburgh Westinghouse High School. Forrest Thrower and April Cheeks Marcus earned silver and bronze respectively for medical math. Both had to demonstrate their knowledge of general math concepts used in the health care field. As part of the medical math competition, students complete a written test that may include the use of ratio proportion, dosage calculation, metric, and household equivalents, Roman numerals, and general medical math problems. On to our next honoree, Chelsea Jeffrey. She brought home the bronze in the food and beverage competition. Congratulations, Chelsea. She studied culinary arts at Pittsburgh Westinghouse, earned her medal by demonstrating her expertise on guest services and guest relations in the dining room. Contestants in this competition are judged on personal appearance, tableside manner, professionalism, ease with guests, and technical and verbal skills. We are glad Chelsea was able to join us this evening because she just came here from Pittsburgh Westinghouse's Senior Awards Night. Chelsea was recognized as one of the top 10 students at the school, and with the top GPA is the school's 2012 valedictorian. Congrats, Chelsea. Our second silver medal winner is James Scheider, who is an HVAC student at Pittsburgh Carrick. James took silver in the HVAC competition by demonstrating his knowledge of air measurement and troubleshooting, electrical troubleshooting, and much more. Our last two Skills USA medal winners, both students in the district's welding program, took gold in their respective categories. Jacob Stewart of Pittsburgh Brashear won the gold medal in the technical math category, where he was tested on mathematical problems commonly found in skilled trades, professional and technical occupations. Jacob obviously knows his numbers since he won and took home the gold medal in the competition. Our other gold medal winner is John Heidkamp of Pittsburgh Carrick. He competed in the job skills competition, where he had to explain and demonstrate an entry-level skill within the welding occupation. Again, congratulations to April Cheeks, John Heidkamp, Chelsea Jeffrey, James Scheider, Jacob Stewart, and Forrest Thrower for their medal-winning performances at the Skills USA District 9 regional competition. Our next DA award also goes to a student in the district's Career and Technical Education program. Pittsburgh Langley Senior Dylan Keeler took home first place in the American Welding Society's 32nd annual Weld Off. Now, Dylan's instructor, who we want to mention, is also responsible for 3 of this evening's honorees. He's their teacher, George Kirk. He's accompanying Dylan this evening. The competition encompasses a geographic area of Western Pennsylvania, Eastern Ohio, and Northern West Virginia. It requires competitors to complete welding test plates in the vertical and overhead positions, which are then subject to X-ray testing. Congratulations, Dylan. Now, this concludes our Distinguished Achievement Awards. We want to once again, congratulations to all the winners. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hobson. Mr. Weiss, may we please have a roll call?
Mr. Brentley? Here. Mrs. Khaleesi?
Here.
Mrs. Fink?
Here.
Dr. Holly?
Here.
Mr. Eisler is absent. Mr. McCray?
Here.
Ms. Shealy?
Here.
Mr. Sumter?
Present.
Mrs. Azuda? Here. 8 members present.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Sumter to share our core beliefs and values.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. The Pittsburgh Board of Education is committed to maximizing the academic achievement of each and every student within the district. Pittsburgh Board of Education is committed to assuring that that's carried out in a safe and orderly learning environment for all students, staff. Pittsburgh Board of Education is committed to distributing resources in an efficient and equitable manner. The Pittsburgh Board of Education is committed to providing the necessary support for those activities carried out within the district. And last but not least, the Pittsburgh Board of Education is committed to improving parental community engagement within the school district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. Will everyone please turn to the minutes from last month? Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions? Khaleesi, McCray. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The minutes stand approved. At this time, I'd like to read the executive session statement. In addition to the executive sessions announced at the legislative meeting of April 25th, 2012, the board met in executive sessions on May 16th, 2012, and immediately before this legislative meeting to discuss various personnel matters that may include, but are not limited to, administrative vacancies and positions opened and closed. Finally, at the executive session immediately before this legislative meeting, the board discussed student discipline cases that involve violations of various portions of the Student Code of Conduct. The board does not vote at executive sessions. We'll now go to the Committee on Education, submitted by the Education Committee. If you would please turn to page 15 of 15 of the report, I'd like to give you the student suspension, transfer, and expulsion numbers for this month. 63 students were suspended for 4 to 10 days. 0 students for 4 to 10 days and transferred to another Pittsburgh public school. 6 students expelled out of school for 11 days or more. 0 students expelled out of school 11 days or more and transferred to another Pittsburgh public school. We will be following our new procedure this evening that was introduced in April. Before voting on education and business reports, board members will be discussing each of the items that were pulled at agenda review and any additional agenda items that are requested to be pulled for discussion this evening. Our discussion will be focused on one issue at a time. My hope is that we will have improved communication on the major items before us. After the discussion is complete, board members will take a roll call vote on the entire report. Agenda items number 8 and 10 were pulled for further discussion at agenda review. At this time, I would ask the board if there are any additional items in the Education Committee report that you would like to pull for additional discussion. Seeing none. Oh,
Yeah, I will be sharing some other comments in the education report that's before us, but I do want to say for the record, once again, I am disappointed in this new system initiated by the Executive Committee in terms of how board members can share or question items that are before us for a vote. This is the consent agenda. We can call it something different, but it is. And it is an attempt to simply not allow board members their full right as an elected officials to ask questions on items before us. Nothing should hinder us from asking questions. So I'll wait my turn at the end, but there are some other items or other items that I would like to raise some questions on. I just want to put that say that for the record. Thank you.
and for the record, I would say that this is not a consent agenda. Dr. Hawley?
I also would like to put on the floor number 9.
Thank you, Dr. Hawley. We'll start with number 8, which is, forgive me, on page 4 of 15, Success Schools. Board authorization requested to enter into a contract with Success Schools. She doesn't, no. Mr. Brentley?
Yes, I want to just ask the staff, I thought the item was going to be pulled completely, but can someone please help me to identify this company? This is the CEP company or an affiliate of the CEP company?
Mr. Brentley, the company is Success Schools.
Okay, are they affiliated with the Community Educational Partners CEP program?
I'd ask Ira to give a formal explanation of their...
Success Schools is a corporation that operates educational programs throughout the country. It is not affiliated with Community Education Partners or any subsidiary of Community Education Partners.
What is this an affiliation, Mr. Weiss, with the company that's now involved with the Clayton program at Clayton?
Success Schools is involved at Clayton under an assignment of that contract that previously was with CEP, but Success Schools is not affiliated at all with CEP. They have no business relationship with them. These are two separate companies.
Okay. They were recommended by CEP at the end of the CEP contract?
I don't believe that's accurate. They came forward to work on the program, and the district determined it was a reasonable alternative to CEP. The contract was assigned to them as it is permitted to be assigned, but this particular contract before you here has no relationship at all with CEP whatsoever. This is a Success Schools contract.
Okay. But this final question, at the end of the CEP contract, there was a clause that allowed them to suggest or recommend who would succeed or take over the contract. And was this the company that they made recommendations at the end of their contract?
This was the company to which the contract was assigned. The district made an independent evaluation of whether this company could perform, and it was determined that it could, and that was the basis upon which the recommendation was made to approve the assignment and the extension of a year.
Okay. And this was the recommendation of the outgoing CEP?
Well, it was an assignment from CEP, but the judgment to retain success and to operate the school as it is was the district. CEP's opinion, if any, played no role in that.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Weiss. I'm aware of who has a final decision, but I guess that what I was trying to get to, which you were able to share somewhat, is at the end of the CEP contract, there was some involvement in recommendation pointing or directing with some of its recommendations for this particular company. I believe that this is one of those contracts that represents an insult to the district. A little over $500,000. We're laying off teachers and no librarians, plus a list of other things we're doing. But we can stop and give a $500,000 contract to a company that had a relationship, indirect or directly, with a company that had a questionable experience here in this district. And I just think it's an item that should not be before us. Disappointed that it's here. And also, Dr. French, this is all behavioral kind of services they are providing?
What Success Schools is going to help us with is really around establishing positive youth-empowered climate. And so it really is behavioral. It's not academic. It's about working with adults around setting positive cultures. And as you know, one of our most important initiatives right now is our teaching and learning environment. And so this will complement this. The Success Schools is a model that we believe will have great success in the schools, especially because they've been endorsed by the principals in the buildings, in the schools. And so we believe that given the buy-in from the schools and the staff, that this will make a good difference for our children.
And Doctor, just a quick question to you as an educator. How does that make you feel to spend $500,000 on behavioral kinds of services and nothing is going towards academic, in light of the fact that I would bet that if we put out a call, that we would have at least 10 to 12 individuals who could easily fit the bill, and agencies within the district who can probably provide the service, I'm guessing, for a fraction of the cost. Does that concern you at all?
Mr. Brantley, I've been to Clayton several times, and I've seen remarkable transformation in terms of that learning environment. This is one of the things that we had spoken to you before, that we would like to replicate the success that they've seen in the culture. We believe that we do have a better educational and academic approach, and we will maintain that in all of our buildings. So it is separate, but clearly we do know that the learning environment has a pretty significant impact on our ability to implement our curriculum, and our teachers, if they're not able to teach and the children are not able to learn, we're no farther ahead. So this is a complement to our existing academic structure. There'll be no change to that academic structure in the buildings because of this contract.
Okay. Okay, well, I once again just want to express my disappointment in these very, very hard times to even have an item like this. It's such a large amount coming before us. Of course, I will not support it. My next question is on okay. Okay, I'll wait for the next one.
Scalise. No question. Dr. Hawley.
Yes, I'm a little bit, first of all, the Success Schools project that the teachers actually visit, and teacher and administrators visited in Philadelphia, that is a charter school. That's not it's part of the Philadelphia Public Schools, but it is a charter school. It is not, it's not run by central office. So I think that people need to know that. I'm still very concerned about the fact that the board members have not been given an opportunity to actually see various components of the program, and that's why I had asked that this particular item may be pulled so that at the Education Committee, we would get a full understanding of how this will actually impact the 3 schools. Another concern that I have is the fact that you mentioned that the teachers and the administrators agree that this will be that this is a program that could be successful in their school. However, nobody mentioned the parents. Now, I do know for a fact that the parents did go. There were a few parents that actually went from the lines, but I would like to know, did any parents accompany you to Philadelphia to see the school from Faison or King?
Not for King, and I'd have to check on it for Faison.
Okay, that's a problem for me, because here you're talking about changing the environment of the school, which I have no problem with. If there is a problem, if the environment is having a problem, I expect for the school to address it. However, I don't know how you can address it without having the support of parents. And if no parents actually saw this program and no parent actually went to Clayton to see the program, then I have a problem in pushing this forward. Again, I think that it's extremely important for each one of the schools to come before us to show us how this is actually going to work. I'll leave it up to my colleague, Mr. Sumter, to give you more questions, but those are the 3 major questions that I had about this particular tab.
Mrs. Fink? Mrs. Azuda? Mrs. Azuda, are you there? Yes, no question, sorry. Thank you. Mr. McCray?
Just a couple things I want to clarify. I'm looking at this. This is not O1 funding, am I correct? This is a grant money that's paying for this?
Correct.
Can't use the grant for hiring teachers anyway, so, okay. Not this grant.
What grant is this? Is this the 6th one? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you can.
Is this a school improvement grant, or is it?
It's a combination of different funding sources, that within those grants there would have been components related to these types of services.
And then something else got a little cloudy in the explanation here. This group has no affiliation with CEP, correct, Mr. Rice?
Correct.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Mr. Sumter?
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. One of the major concerns I have is that this was not presented in an education committee meeting. The opportunity to go into more detail and in-depth conversation with the parties involved, with the board, and to also have that meeting available to the public, that they could see the meeting also. The biggest thing to make this successful is that you need a buy-in from students, parents, and from teachers and administrators. You need to have that buy-in for this to work. You can't just, in my mind, say that you're going to do this without everybody on board and agreeing to it. Having come from a rather lengthy meeting this afternoon with the Hill District Education Council and conversations with them, their concern is, of course, University Preparatory School at Margaret Malines, but still there was overall, I would say, agreement that the schools that were visited, or that what Success Schools does, even with Clayton Academy, is that there is a change in behavior, a change for the good. That nobody could dispute. There may have been some concerns as to whether or not what's proposed in this board tab will actually work in the district, whether there's the right number of individuals assigned to these schools and whether they can handle that population and within the time frame carry out the intended agenda. A lot of times we have things that are proposed, and we've had a lot of things going on in the district, but as far as the follow-up or the accountability or knowing whether they're working or not is not readily apparent. So it's always we hear new ideas, they sound good, and then we move on to the next ideas. There's no follow-up because there's a lot of behavior intervention programs within the district currently, and are they working or not? So for me, the bottom line at this point in time, having talked extensively with members of the Hill District Education Council, different points of view, I would be in favor of tabling this tab for 1 month until the next legislative meeting, which would allow us to vote one way or the other before the intended start times for the contracts. The operating periods for Malines is July 1st, King, July 1st, Faison, June 1st. That would put a problem for Faison. For King and Malines, the July start date would be okay if we were to vote on it next month. For Faison, there would be concern because we wouldn't have that opportunity. They're supposed to start at the beginning of next month. Question, Mr. Weiss. Can we break this tab into 3 sections, or can we vote on part of it and table part of it? Is that possible?
I mean, obviously, you could amend the item to change the number of schools and to adjust the contract amount accordingly. So something like that. If that's what, I mean, I take it from your comments, that's what you're thinking about doing vis-a-vis these schools. But yes, you could amend the motion to make it reflect what you believe is more acceptable at this time.
I wouldn't want to go ahead with that motion at this time without hearing from all board members as far as their comments and concerns regarding this, whether they, just to find that out first before that would be proposed. But if I were at this point to propose a motion, it would be to pull Malines and King in that they have July 1st starting dates, and if that could be held or tabled until the June legislative meeting to vote on, which would still keep them on schedule as it's indicated here as far as the start of the operating periods. But other than that, that's just to give an intimation of what I'm thinking at this point in time. If the community's not, if you don't have the community buy-in, or if you don't have buy-in from the students and the parents, it's all for naught. And I think we need to take that time to have everybody on board to understand what is actually happening, why it's happening, because some people might give the impression that we're trying to run this just like the schools in Philadelphia is being run, or we're trying to run this exactly like Clayton Academy is being run, or whatever, but we still don't know that. And because this item has caused such a stir, the bottom line is probably going to be good for the kids, but because it has caused such a stir and conversation within the community, I think it's only right to afford the community and individuals the opportunity, especially for board members, to take that time to digest this a little matter. And I'm only saying from now until the next legislative meeting. Thank you at this time, Ms. Shelley.
You're welcome, Mr. Sumter. Anyone else? Hold on one second. Mr. Brentley or Mrs. Scalise? On number 8.
Was that a, you didn't put a motion on? Okay, well, for the motion, I would support tabling the entire item. I think it could be perceived as a little unfair to pull those two for reconsideration, additional information, buy-in, as you mentioned, but then leave phase one out. And that's, you know, they're all suffering, you know what I mean? So, I mean, I would support it. It's a great idea to bring it up before the education meeting, so I would support the entire item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my question would be, I guess it's been 2 months ago or so that we voted for Success Schools to take over CEP, and from what I understand, they're doing a phenomenal job, and many board members had gone there and had paid a visit to see what was going on, and I don't understand why the questioning. I got the impression that everything was doing well there, and I'm not sure I understand why we're second-guessing this. But my bigger question would be to you, Mr. Weiss. Let's say 2-3 months down the line after these contracts have started, do we have the right to end them at any given time?
Well, the contract hasn't been done yet. Certainly, we typically on these kinds of contracts, as opposed to the contract for Clayton, which is a little more involved, we would take the position that we need as permissive a cancellation policy as possible. Mm-hmm. But like any contract, it's subject to agreements. So I can't sit here today and tell you what's in there because we typically don't do these until the item is approved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, if I'm reading this correctly, Malliance and King would only have them there for a year anyway. And Faison would have them for 2 years. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, Ms. Pugliese.
I think that if the superintendent has asked us to consider this, I would think it's something we should support.
Thank you, Mrs. Pugliese. Dr. Hawley?
Yes. I'm going to go back to my original question about the parents. I was at the same meeting this afternoon at University Prep at Malliance. And it was good to hear the concerns and the accolades coming from the parents. So we didn't have this same kind of activity going on for Pittsburgh King and Pittsburgh Faison. And see, and that bothers me. The district wants to change the culture of the building so that it's more suitable for learning, but you're not including the parents. I don't know how you can have a whole change of attitude for a school without including the parents.
Dr. Hawley, this is a professional development model, and we do a lot of things in terms of professional development, for example, PBIS. It is not so much, we clearly want parental involvement, but there's, for example, another tab in here, Success 1, 2, 3, which is a similar way that we are improving our learning environments through offering professional development with our staff. So in this case, it's not essentially changing the structure of a school. What we are doing is equipping our teachers with better ways to interact with our children that we know are proven through what this company has done with Clayton. So, and I'm not sure that in every time that we do professional development with staff that we, really do great outreach for parent involvement. Maybe we should. I just know that this is really not something that's going to essentially change the functioning and structure on the front end. We hope through professional development, it will change the culture in the building. For example, moving from rules to expectations, those kind of things. So it is really, again, professional development for staff.
Well, I have to disagree with you. This is not just a professional development activity. You're actually going in, developing rituals and routines for a school environment. That's basic, and if I'm wrong, Mr. Sumter, tell me, isn't that what they told us today? And we had the person there from Clayton to really inform us about how the program was actually going to work. So, no, it's not just professional development. It really is a changing of the culture of the building. And I don't believe that this would happen to another school without having parents at the table to make sure that what you're doing is conducive to their children and to the learning of that building. We want to keep parents as partners. And that's why I got to get to number 9, because
Sorry, Dr. Holly, can we stay on number 8?
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just really, I can't believe that, we're not including parents in helping to create a more reasonable environment for learning. And also I want to be very clear that Clayton is a different type of school. It is not your regular school environment. It is an alternative ed school. Not that we can't use some of the benefits that occur at Clayton and use them within our school district. I really do want to see that. That's why I actually voted for the Clayton model to stay within our district, so that central office can learn from that environment, bring some of those those good practices and procedures that they're doing, and bring them into our school, developing our own model to put in our school. So, are you telling me that we are not capable of doing that?
Dr. Holly, this is a part of that suggestion that you had made, and one of the ways to do that, all schools have rituals and routines. Some work better than others. And what we found is that this company is able to help us establish rituals and routines where it is yet to be to the degree that we need it to be. So this is something that we will implement, and we're implementing it slowly. These principals did request this from us. We did not pursue this. So I do have to respect a principal when they come and say, this is something that I would like to help me change the culture in my building. I can agree to it, I can support it, because I can see that Success Schools has actually had people visit each school, did not do a one-size-fits-all model, and is going to tailor it to the needs of this school. So again, I have to have some trust in the principals when they bring this to me and say, this is what I want to do to help improve the teaching and learning environment in my school.
And I also want to trust the principal, being a former principal, I do want to trust the principals that they do this as well. But sitting in this seat and working with central office, I also want to be very clear that I also want to include the community and the parents in that process as well, especially as schools such as Faison, University Prep at Malines, and King, because of the numbers of students there that are really just not doing well. And so I really believe that it should be a community effort. And I'm not saying that I dislike this program. I do believe in the rituals and routines that they have going on at Clayton. I have visited Stetson before it was a Success School and after it was a Success School. So I'm very much aware, and only. So I'm very much aware of what goes on in those two environments. But I am still very concerned about the fact that we did not include all of the major players when we decided to bring this into wholesale into a regular school environment. And I just have to ask this one last question. If it doesn't work, who's going to be held accountable for it? Because I can't go through another year watching children fail.
Mr. Sumter, I'm sorry. Do you have something? Because I have something on number 8, too. I just wanted the record to show that Faison sent more than 20 teachers, and they have about 38. So more than half of the staff, the teaching staff at Faison went to Stetson. And Faison is a teacher-assigned school as approved by the board. And those teachers, independent of our relationship with CEP, determined that Success Schools was the best program for the students in Faison. And while I hear the concerns about community involvement, the reality is that there is not a lot of parental involvement at Faison. And the other reality, or in my mind, the other reality is that we don't, as parents, understand the nuances of these types of programs. I will say also that Faison piloted this program with their third graders, I believe, and it could have been the fifth graders. And they saw not only the leadership of those children grow, they saw the academics of those children improve. So based on that school's assessment and the results that they've seen through their pilot program, I can't do anything but to support trying this program full out board at Faison Elementary. Mr. Sumter, forgive me. Thank you.
Oh, no, that's quite all right. I wanted to hear that first before I talked anyway. Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Again, I don't want to step on Faison's plan. They're talking about June 1st. That's the first to hear that teachers are involved with this and had looked at it. At the agenda review, that's what I had mentioned, that we hadn't heard from staff, the principals and teachers, and it might be nice if they could present to us. This conversation is the result of not having this tab or this item presented to the board to know what it is. So if we're to take face value whatever is recommended to us, there's no need to have any education committee meetings at all. Whatever is recommended, we just vote on it. So some folks like to understand what is being planned, how it's being carried out, why it's being planned, what's the current situation, what's the need for it. More information than just what's on paper and says, we're going to do this and it's going to work. So that's why at agenda review, you can ask as much as you can. And because it hadn't come through an education committee meeting, the reason for pulling it so that we can discuss it tonight is a result of that. Had it been in an education committee meeting, had it been the staff or those who intend this to present to the board, a lot of these questions might be taken care of by this point in time. But because they're not, then I still contend that at least two, I can't speak for King because I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard anything from parents, I haven't heard anything from teachers, administrators, whatever. But because I know they have a July 1st start date, holding that for 1 month I don't think would jeopardize that program. Have heard extensively from individuals involved with Malines. In any case, whether they're to have whatever level of degree of involvement, you don't want folks looking at a program with skepticism. You want people to understand that this is what the program is and how they could help support it. It might be just sitting back and watching, or it might be involved directly. But because that doesn't happen, because we still have the window of opportunity to bring that about between now and the June legislative meeting, I would rather err on the side of having enough or more information than not having any information. So again, when the time is proper, when the conversation has been exhausted, I want to put forth a motion to amend this tab to include Faison at this point in time and table King and Malines till next legislative meeting.
I believe there's a motion on the floor.
I'll put that in, that's in the form of a motion then.
Is there a second? Holly? Discussion on the motion?
I just want to say, and we're going on and repeating ourselves, I just wish, Mr. Sumter, that your motion would be one that's all-inclusive. As I mentioned before, it's just not right or to suggest that the children there in the Hill District, it's more important that we preserve and work things out and get it right for them while leaving Phase 1 open. It is a questionable item before us. It deserves full attention of the Education Committee, not in parts or pieces, but for the entire thing. So I won't be supporting it, but we have to do a little better than that. We don't separate kids because if someone's in a particular area or we want to take care of them or they were part of the Hill District Education Committee. It's unfortunate that Phase 1 doesn't have anybody there, but they need the same kind of once-over from the Education Committee. So I'm disappointed it's being separated. For me, all children are equal, so I won't be supporting that. I'll do it for all. I'm not going to separate them. Thank you.
Dr. Hawley?
I can support that, even though I am very concerned that in the Homewood area, there were no parents on that trip. You can take 28 teachers or 20-some teachers, then you should have taken a couple parents on that bus to visit that school as well. So I do know a lot of the teachers at Phase 1, because a lot of the teachers at Phase 1 were teachers at Lincoln. And I support them because I know what they want to do in that school. And I support the principal as well. I know her heart is with those students. So if they want to get started with this June 1st, you know, I just really wish that they had put parents on that bus so that they could have seen the program as well. I'm not saying that I don't want to have the program. I just want to make sure that everybody, all of the major players in the school, which includes the parents and community, are apprised of what is going on in that school. And you just dropped the ball and didn't do that.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Fink? Mrs. Azuda? Mr. Sumter?
Because I heard the comment about the teachers from Phase 1 going, and because of their June 1st start date, I don't know the impact. If I could understand that if a July 1st date would not be detrimental to Phase 1, I'd be willing to amend my motion to include all, but without knowing that, can anybody answer why there's a June 1st start date on Phase 1 and not July 1st?
The tab was written by the principal, so it may be that they're planning earlier professional development, because there is an impact, again, that Success Schools also needs to prepare, and you know, we try to give as much time as we can so that they can prepare their staff and make sure they're moving people around in time for them to be ready as soon as the contract lands with us.
Even if it were to be tabled, that still doesn't preclude getting presentation from Phase 1. It might be after the fact. So I'm thinking of trying to still get the same information that the board needs to make intelligent decisions, but not upset the apple cart such that it negatively impacts what's being planned by any of the schools in that sense. Without that information, I would think or hope that the principal of Phase 1 is well intended on their plan, and that they would do whatever is necessary to get the buy-in that's necessary to carry this out in an effective manner. But at this point in time, I'll keep the motion as is.
We have a motion on the floor. Can we have a roll call, Mr. Weiss?
Was there a second to the motion?
Dr. Hawley provided.
All right, this motion is to approve, to amend item A to reflect a June 1 date for Faison and to defer action on Lyons and King until the June legislative meeting. Is that correct? Okay. Mr. Brentley?
No.
Mr. Khaleesi?
No.
Mrs. Fink?
No.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
No.
Ms. Shealy?
No.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda? No. Okay, the motion to amend fails 2 to 6, so the item 8 remains as it is.
Is there more discussion on item 8? So can we move on to item 9, please? In that specific education group, a contract with them. Mr. Brentley?
I'll wait to hear Dr. Hawley's comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Khaleesi? No questions. Dr. Hawley?
I will definitely be supporting this tab, but I also want to bring into the issue that I had mentioned at agenda review. I really and strongly believe that this organization should be given to the board as well. We need workshops around the attitudes and beliefs about the role race plays in schools and school systems. I'm not trying to call anybody any names. I just think that this organization can make us more sensitized to the people that we are servicing in this school district. I should not have to ask for parents to be included in a major remaking or rebuilding of schools that are failing. And these 3 schools were basically failing in terms of how they interact with students, but parents are not given the opportunity to be a part of that. When I look at the people who are being promoted, who are being given, making sure that they have particular jobs, it is not a diverse pool of people. Mr. Brentley did bring this up a couple of months ago, but as I get in more and more into the human resource part of this district, I see that that is definitely true. So I think that as a board, we need to be a part of this process as well, not just schools. I think that it is imperative that we have a workshop as well, and that's why I wanted to bring this up. And I'm definitely going to be supporting this effort.
Thank you. Just as to address that slightly, and Mrs. Khaleesi as past president, and Mrs. Azuda, if you can hear me well enough, please correct me. The board has a budget from which we could decide to use our own funds to support this kind of work. Because I would assume, and maybe this is a question for you, Dr. French, that this amount listed is already sort of allocated towards certain schools or programs?
Do you want me to answer it all?
I'm just going to jump in here. This amount it's retroactive, but we do intend to continue our partnership with PEG. One of the things we're working on, which we could extend to the board, is that we do have a cadre of central office, school-based administrators and teachers who are actually becoming what we call affiliates, which affiliates are folks that are trained the trainers in Beyond Diversity and some of the racial equity work. So they're working very closely with Mr. Singleton and his consultants. So we're able to do this training in a sustainable way rather than constantly relying on the group. So that's one option. And the other option is that we do have another contract with PEG that covers our new teachers and some of the racial equity work at both King and Brashear as beacon schools. So there's ways that we can extend to the board without doing another contract, you know, if that would be your pleasure.
Thank you. Dr. Holly? Are you?
Just to answer that question, I'm going to be, I know that we are watching our pennies. However, I'm going to ask for Mr. Singleton because I don't think that the conversation that we're going to have should be privy to a teacher or a trainer or somebody else that's in the district. I think that should be the board's workshop with the director of the Pacific Education Group.
Are you done, Dr. Holly? Yes. Mrs. Fink? No. Mrs. Azuda? Mr. McCray?
I agree, we need to have a workshop around this area, so at this point, I'm just going to abstain on this because I'm not going to support it.
Mr. Sumter?
The biggest challenge we have within the Pittsburgh Public School District is the disparity in achievement among the students. The biggest problem we have in this universe is similarly situated. Unless we come to grips with reality and want to change instead of just going with the status quo, then it's sometimes good to see things or learn things differently or from different perspectives, but to do it in a congenial manner. And in the sessions that I have attended, that Mr. Singleton initially conducted, it is eye-opening to some extent, and it's beneficial in that without antagonizing anybody, without putting anybody on Front Street, without intimidating or causing ill feelings, certain conversations have to be carried out in a courageous manner. And unless we deal with the root systemic problems of this district, we'll be here until the cows come home and still talk about what's wrong and the disparities that exist. So as much as we can afford ourselves of learning, as much as we can afford ourselves of information that will improve our decision-making, as much as we talk about equity and really understand and come to grips with that term, we either do it or we don't. We're committed to it by what we voted on, so we need to be about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. And I'll just add that while it varies from schools or from school to school, there are parents who are exposed to the courageous conversations, and I was one before I was on the board. Under the leadership of Mr. Maystein, there was a group who met over several months, if not more than a year, 2 years? How time flies when you're having fun. To have courageous conversations. So I didn't get the pleasure of seeing Mr. Singleton or hearing him deliver that training, but I did get the pleasure of going through it with a group of fellow parents, and it was beneficial. So I would encourage the schools who have access to this to bring their PTOs, PTAs, and PSCCs into this process and into these conversations. Is there any additional discussion on number 9? We will move on to number 10, educational consultants for the development of Pittsburgh Westinghouse Plan. Mr. Brentley? Mrs. Khaleesi? Dr. Hawley?
Again, I'd like to know, and I'm sorry that Dr. Lane isn't here to answer this question, and I'm not sure if she did at the agenda review. Will we be getting more services from Dr. Burt Bennett for this process?
It's my understanding that we will be getting additional services, and I believe that that was written into this contract, that where she will be, she's not writing the plan, she's facilitating and providing information. So I believe that she will also, there was a portion of the funding in here that will allow for her to continue to consult and work with Dr. Lane.
I don't see the, it just has from May 11th and May 12th, and monies that she spent in April that we owed her for. 12th is gone. What are we doing in the future?
So if you turn the page, onto page 6, at the very top of that, it does state that any additional professional services as requested by the superintendent. So that was built into this tab. So it's to pay for the services already rendered and services moving forward at the request of Dr. Lane.
So this whole board tab of $12,000, she's just going to get now, and then she'll be able to come back and support the effort? I'm not sure.
It's broken down into two parts. For the service she already provided, $7,500, and for the future service of $4,500.
Will that include the two women that came with her for the workshop that she did with us?
If it's requested by Dr. Lane, it will include it.
I just wanted to be clear that she did a phenomenal job with the community. She worked with the community and parents, teachers, and of course the staff. So I'm excited that that Dr. Crenshaw and her team and Dr. Lane were able to include a variety of people to help change the culture of Westinghouse. And so I'm looking forward to seeing her come back to support that effort. And you don't know when the plan will be done, do you?
There is a particular date and a deadline. I don't know it off the top of my head, and I'm just checking in the tab. I do not have the exact date of the tab, but there is a deadline that we are working against. As a matter of fact, Dr. Atua is not with us this evening because she is at Westinghouse continuing this work.
Mrs. Fink? Mrs. Azuda? Mr. McCray? Mr. Sumter? Are there any other items in the education report that need to be discussed at this time? Mr. Brentley.
Just a quick comment on number 33. Doctor, can you tell me, we have, first of all, this is in addition to the contract that we discussed a month or so ago for Dr. Nagaro, number one. And number two, there are three different, it appears to be entities here. There's the Metropolitan Centers for Urban Education, then there's Dr. Nagaro, and now it's suggesting the New York University enter into a contract. So where are we? There's some moving parts. How does that work, and which one are we under contract with? And are they all one and the same?
Mr. Brentley, we do apologize for the confusion here. This is an amended item because when the board approved this last month, we put in the wrong name, and the name should have been New York University, which is a university that Dr. Nagaro works for. So the payment actually goes to the university, and we inadvertently named the center that he is responsible for at NYU. So the payment is, we did not put the right payment. The payment is to New York University, which is where Dr. Nagaro works.
Okay.
So we do apologize for any
And
confusion.
so the other two are, now he is also a consultant individually as well, under his own name, and then he's not?
No, our work with Dr. Nagaro is through New York University,
Okay.
which is the center that he leads at that university, which is the Metropolitan Center.
Okay. So it is Metro at the New York University. It's not New York University.
No, it is.
So if I can just, the entity with which we are contracting and to whom we pay is New York University.
Okay.
That was the direction we were given by Dr. Nagaro when the contract was drawn up. That is why we need to have an amendment. Dr. Nagaro is an employee of New York University, and the center in which he's involved is part of New York University, it's not separate.
Okay.
So our relationship is with NYU, which is New York University.
Okay. Well, I just want to say that I have yet to meet him. I understand we are scheduled to meet him. I know that he's been at Perry a couple of times, I believe, or he had some of his associates there. And the response has been one of very, very positive. They were extremely excited. They felt very, very comfortable. They felt like that they knew what they were talking about and they had some direction. And so I have yet to meet them. I'm pretty excited and waiting for the opportunity to meet them. They also mentioned that there's some positive things on some of their associates that they can possibly use towards some of the male students up in the building. So, that's why I was curious on where. And so whatever it is, we make sure we don't change it, because whatever we've had so far appears to be something that the staff seem to enjoy and seem to get a lot of information, positive stuff. And I'm looking forward to meeting his staff and associates as well. The final
Mr. Brentley, I'm
question.
sorry, can we stay on that item?
Oh, sure.
If anyone else,
anybody else. Okay,
does
that's
anyone else
fine.
have any comments on that item? Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Forgive me for interrupting. Please go on.
Okay, and then the final question was just on number 34. This is a name changing for Langley. And I said it before, but I think I probably have to do something formally. It is, the name that they're going to be using is Pittsburgh Langley. Is that correct? For number 34, the official naming of the K-8 school, Langley facility?
Samuel P. Langley,
Okay, why did we say?
because it will be referred to as Pittsburgh Langley.
Okay, so the official name, so we're removing, I want to remove the word Pittsburgh. It is starting to get super silly. It is what it is. And so I just want to, make my comment about, I'm glad to see that we're keeping the name Langley, but I just think it's time to remove this Pittsburgh in front of every name. Just makes no sense. Doctor, I'm going to suggest that to you, to suggest to Dr. Lane, if necessary, I'm willing to put something on the floor to do it, but I think we're kind of past that stage. We're here in Pittsburgh, and it absolutely makes no sense. And I mean, for me too, it takes me back 5 or 6 years. It was one of the most embarrassing consulting contracts that we've ever given. So it's over, they're paid, let's move on. It makes no sense. Just remove the Pittsburgh from the name. So that's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
Seeing no additional comments, Mr. Rice, I'm sorry, Mrs. Fink.
I might as well just say it for different reasons, but I agree with Mark on removing the Pittsburgh from the front of the school names. They're not Chicago Carrick or New York Langley. I think it's a little extra ink that we don't need.
Thank you, Mrs. Fink. Seeing no additional comments on the report on education, Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Brentley?
Yes on the report. I'll be voting no on page 4, number 8.
Mrs. Clazy?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes on the report as a whole, no on number 8.
Mr. McCray?
Yes on the report as a whole, and I'll abstain on number 9.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes on the report as a whole, no on number 8.
Mrs. Azuda? Yes. Okay, the report's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. We will now move to the report on business and finance submitted by Mrs. Khaleesi, Business Chair, and Mr. McCray, Finance Chair, and their committee. There were no agenda items pulled from the business finance report at last week's agenda review meeting. Are there any additional items that need pulled for further discussion at this time in the business finance report? Seeing none, Mr. Weiss, may we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Zuda? Yes. Report's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. We will now return to the personnel report. That includes addendums A, B, C, and D that is before you. Are there any questions on the personnel report at this time?
Yes, I'll have some questions at a later date. I'd like to hear my colleagues' comments. Dr. Hollis.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Mrs. Khaleesi? Dr. Hawley?
Yes. On page 1 of the, I'm glad that, thank you in advance, Mrs. Spolar, for giving me the definition or the, of what the program manager as a Broad resident, what they will be doing. However, I'm wondering why we are actually entering into this agreement with them, and can you explain the agreement to the public as to what this actually means?
The Broad Residency program is one which identifies a nationwide cohort of approximately 40 individuals and then deploys them to school districts throughout the country. It is a way of supporting work in individual districts at no cost to the district, and also a way to build talent across the country of individuals committed to improving urban education. So this would be receiving one of those identified Broad residents to serve his residency here in the Pittsburgh School District.
Did you actually interview this person, or did we interview any of our central office people, interview any of these people, this person?
Yes, this individual was in Pittsburgh for a day and met with a variety of individuals.
Tell me this, was there an opportunity to identify a variety of people that could actually take this position?
So again, there's a cohort that is identified by the Broad Foundation. There were 2 individuals who expressed an interest in visiting and looking at Pittsburgh, and so we spoke with 2 individuals who were exploring Pittsburgh as a possible placement.
Is there any possibility, since we're going to be laying off so many people as of July 1st, is there a possibility that since you've already established a relationship with Broad, that we actually offer Broad Fellows to them so that we can actually use people that we know that are a part of our community, that have worked in our schools, in order to have this type of opportunity?
So individuals from the Pittsburgh community could certainly apply to the Broad Foundation and go through the selection process to possibly become Broad residents.
Do we have a particular type of agreement with them to take these individuals?
I'm not aware of any such agreement.
Mr. Weiss, do we have an agreement?
We have no agreement with the Broad Foundation to take any individuals. If this individual is approved this evening, there would be a contract for these services with end dates and so forth, but the districts are no obligation to take individuals from Broad. There is no contract with Broad.
So when we get a new person like this, isn't it customary when we're doing a contract like this, isn't it customary that we would, the board members would actually be able to see the resume of this person? Or not? I'm not sure.
I'm sure we've seen resumes before, Ms. Spolar. I don't know if there are certain classes of resumes that we see and we don't see.
None that I'm aware of. You could certainly have access to a resume if you wish to see it, certainly.
I think that, I know we don't see resumes of people who are already within the school district, but someone who is coming from outside the school district and you're actually giving a contract to, I believe that we should be able to see the contract that, a resume, so that, you know, we'll know as well as officers in human resources the capabilities of this person and what they actually have to offer to the school district.
Mrs. Fink. Mrs. Azuda. Mr. McCray.
I just want to recognize and thank all of our employees that are working in the military and thank them for a job well done and remind everybody this is Memorial Day weekend. Be safe.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Mr. Sumter. Mr. Brentley.
Yes, I just wanted to ask Mr. Weiss, our relationship with Broad, is it a contractual agreement at all?
The district has no contractual relationship with Broad. Broad makes individuals available, as Mrs. Spolar has described, through a program it operates to place certain individuals in positions for which they have trained or were educated. Broad underwrites the cost of these individuals. We have no contract with Broad. The relationship is with the individual that comes here.
Okay. I just think, first of all, we've been here a couple of years with Broad. I do believe it is time that we evaluate the relationship. We've been in the district. We've often told that when something was either hiring individuals or we were doing something that was Broad related, they would always say, well, it's not coming out of our money, or it's Broad money. The fact of the matter is that it's still money that we are responsible for spending the right way. I would love to see, and Doctor, maybe you can answer this, have we ever had an independent evaluation on what Broad has contributed to the district?
Mr. Brentley, not to my knowledge. I can certainly make a note and ask Dr. Lane, but I'm not aware of one, and I've not read one.
Okay. Well, I just want to recommend that I think it is time to get an independent evaluation of the Broad relationship. I, for one, as a board member, I think it is time to sever the relationship personally, because there's been quite a few issues that were questionable that we almost had to go along because we were always told it's Broad. And it just hasn't been a good relationship with the Pittsburgh Public Schools. I don't know nationally, but I can tell you locally here, it's a different philosophy, and it just hasn't been one that's been supportive of this urban kind of setting. So I would like to see an independent evaluation, and independent meaning no one having any affiliation with the district, that would do an evaluation exactly what have they been able to bring to the table. Where are the dollars? We're thankful for the dollars, but it came at a very, very high price. So I'm one that I would just hope that we move forward to severing its relationship and then simply moving forward with best practices for this district. I had one other question.
Any other?
I believe that's it. Thank you.
Oh, I thought you did. I'm sorry. I thought you had said you had no other questions. Seeing no additional questions or comments on the report on personnel, Mr. Weiss, may we please have a roll call? I'm sorry. Please forgive me, Mr. Weiss. Mr. Bentley.
It's a quick question. Ms. Spolar, we are opening and closing some custodians and plant operation positions. Can you tell me, are we utilizing the list of the employees that we laid off in the beginning of the year? Or are they calling them back first?
Yes, any furloughed individuals have recall rights pursuant to their collective bargaining agreement, and we certainly observe those recall rights.
Have we pretty much exhausted our recall list?
Yes, not all are pulled back into bona fide positions, but through vacancies for various reasons, as well as bona fide positions, I believe all of the furloughed individuals are back actively employed.
Okay. And then finally, with the closing of some of these schools, how many positions have we lost or had to write out, or we don't have anymore with the closing of the schools?
The position openings and closings that are in Addendum C represent 5 fewer positions.
5, okay. All right, thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Fuller, just to add to that, does that 5 reduction of position displace anybody from employment?
There are no furloughs created by that. Attrition accounts for all of those.
Thank you, Ms. Bolar. Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Bentley?
Yes on the report. I'll be voting no on new appointments, page 1, number 1.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes on the report as a whole. On page 16, number 19, I will abstain.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I realize that I'm out of the process. But Mr. Bentley, may I ask you to consider looking at page 17 and reconsider your vote?
I can tell you it's news to me because she was.
That's why I wanted you to go on record with the right vote.
Let me do this, and I will abstain because she was actually told something completely different, and so I am shocked to see here and being told something completely different. But I will abstain from number 14, page 17, number 14.
Forgive me, but I thought that was appropriate.
Yeah, that's news to me. Thank you.
You're welcome. Did Mrs. Khaleesi vote? Yes. Oh, you're on this. It's you, Mr.
You
Weiss.
voted, right?
I voted, but to be on the safe side, to make sure that I was clear about page 16, number 19, I
Right.
abstain.
Right.
Thank you.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
I'm voting no on page 1, number 1, and I'm voting no because I don't have a resume. I'm voting no on page 12, number 2, transfers from one position to another, change of salary, and I'm going to get this right this time. Addendum D, I am not going to support the transfer or the demotion of number 1 and number 2.
But you have to
And I yes for the report is the other parts of the report.
So you're voting yes on the report as a whole, except for those you've noted, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes on the report as a whole. I'll be voting no on item 1 and 2 in addendum D.
Addendum, which
Yes.
which addendum?
D. David.
Mrs. Azuda? Mr. Brentley, do you have something to add?
Yes, sir. I have to follow the educator here on this board, and so please add My no vote to page 1, addendum D, 1 and 2. Thank you.
Report's approved. I'm sorry, this,
You did, yeah, you said yes.
yeah, you said yes. Yes, you did. You said yes. You
I'm
okay?
sorry. Yes, I am fine with my vote. I just wanted to make sure it was registered.
You voted, yes.
I vote in every election I can. Thank you.
At least once, right?
At least once. Okay, now, I'm sorry. Can we now go to the reports, the financial and controller reports? Before you. We have the financial statements of April 30th, 2012. Please turn to budget matters, and I'd like to call to your attention the 2012-2013 special education budget that is before you. Before we take a roll call vote, are there any questions or comments? Mr. McCray?
I wanted to make a comment on the financial statement. There's been some talk in Harrisburg, some dude up there saying that we basically don't know what we're doing. I challenge you, man, come here and go over the books with me, and I'll show you where the money is.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Are there any other, Mr. Brentley?
Yes. What page, we're voting on the special ed budget, is that correct? Correct. Okay, last month we discussed, or we had the reorganization of special ed, is that correct? Or is that included as well? So that was before us. I am just skipping a beat a little here, so.
Yeah, I thought it was 2 months ago, so don't listen to me.
The restructuring of special ed was when, Doctor, she knows everything.
I guess Pete knows more, so he's going to answer.
The budget before you this evening incorporates the actions the board took last month related to the special education organization.
Reorganization. So this here is just the dollars added to the reorganization?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And, okay, okay, that's incorporated in the financial report, Pete? Mr. Kamar?
It's incorporated within the special education budget before you for adoption.
Oh.
Under the budget matters tab.
Under the yellow tab?
That's red, I believe.
Red tab. Beautiful. Yes, sir. Got you now. Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments on the special education budget, Dr. Hawley?
Yes, I'm just, very concerned about the fact that we are losing 55 teachers. And I do believe 48 of those teachers, if I'm not mistaken, are non-gifted ed teachers. I'm hoping, and I'm going to walk out on the limb and pray that this is enough to service our most neediest population in the district. But I don't know how, but, we're going to walk out on the limb and be prayerful that this is going to be workable for schools. But 48 people is a lot of people to lose to service our children.
Thank you, Dr. Hawley. Any additional comments on the special, Mr. Brentley?
I just want to say I was trying to separate them. I'm missing a little because I thought everything was before us, the actual reorganization plan as well as the budget. And so if I voted for it last month, I missed that one. But in good conscience, I will not be supporting this item. I'm sure that most board members are hearing the same thing. If there's anything that this district has been able to get right, it's been our special ed. I can speak personally about Conroy and the work that's happening and taking place over there. The students, the staff is just second to none. I attend their graduations, actually take a day off and just see how the special staff handle these students and the parents. And so it is hard for me to attend this graduation and to look those parents in the face and say, we restructured. You may see a different impact on providing service to your child. So I don't support it. I just wished we would have had a full-blown out question and answer session with the employees, with the folks on the ground, to really ask and get some of their recommendations. And so like the old saying goes, if it's not broke, you don't fix it. And we could have easily, as a board, made a decision to direct this staff to find those dollars elsewhere. Do not touch this, because these students depend on us. The parents depend on us. The staff is doing miracles with a skeleton staff. So I won't be supporting it, and just disappointed we did not reach out, truly reach out to those who are out there to ask for recommendations. Thank you.
Are there any additional questions on? Okay, Mrs. Azuda, please.
I realize we're changing the education delivery model of it, but my concerns are a little bit abated by the knowledge that the local task force has been instrumental in creating this plan, and they do support it. So that makes me feel a little bit better about giving my support to it, is knowing that they support it, because those folks meet monthly and talk about everything that goes on in the classrooms and looking out for the well-being of the kids. And Tina Calabro is active in it. She had her son at public hearing this week. And these folks know what's going on. So I very much appreciate their support and input of it. And so I will be giving my support to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. And just to add, I believe it's the Local Task Force for the Right to Education is the full name. You're welcome. Is there any other questions or comments on the special education budget? Seeing none. Mr. Weiss. Please have a roll call vote.
Mr. Brentley.
No.
Ms. Khaleesi.
Yes.
Mrs. Fink.
Yes.
Dr. Hawley.
Yes.
Mr. McCray.
Yes.
Ms. Shealy.
Yes.
Mr. Sumter.
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda.
Yes.
Okay, the item is approved 7-1.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. We will now move on to new business items. There are two new business resolutions in our legislative agenda this evening. The first is to accept a donation of musical instruments. I'd like to read the resolution at this time. Resolved that the Board of Directors of the School District of Pittsburgh authorizes proper officers to accept donations of musical instruments from the Mr. Hollins Opus Foundation. This donation is made possible through generous funding from Fidelity Investments. The donation will consist of the following Yamaha instruments: 4 alto saxophones, 2
I think it's euphoniums.
Euphoniums, horns, 1 oboe, and 1 marimba. Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. The estimated retail value of this donation is $20,000. The board extends its thanks and appreciations to the Mr. Hollins Opus Foundation and Fidelity Investments for their support of our students at Pittsburgh Spring Hill K-5 through this very generous donation of musical instruments. Second. Mr. McCray, Mr. Sumter. Are there any questions or comments on the new business item? I'll ask the question because I obviously do not know. What's a euphonium?
You know what it is? She doesn't know.
Well, that's really awesome. I think Mr. Weiss suggested it's some type of horn.
I think it is.
We're Googling it right now.
We'll bring it up later if someone could find it. If seeing no additional questions or comments, Mr. Weiss, may we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Ms. Khaleesi? Yes. Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley? Yes. Mr. McCray?
Thank you, yes.
Mrs. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter? Mr.
We're voting on a conical bore tenor-voiced brass instrument. It derives its name from the Greek word euphonous, meaning well-sounding or sweet-voiced. I'm voting yes.
Thank you. Okay, what is that? Now we know.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
The item's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss, and thank you very much, Mr. Sumter. The second new business resolution before us is from the Committee on Education requesting the renaming of Pittsburgh McKnocker School. I will read the resolution at this time. Now therefore be it resolved that the board authorize David B. Oliver Citywide Academy to be the official name of the school formerly known as Pittsburgh McKnocker, which for communications purposes shall be referred to as Pittsburgh Oliver. And in plain English, this is requesting that we authorize the new name of Pittsburgh McKnocker to be David B. Oliver Citywide Academy. So moved. Khaleesi, McCray. Are there any questions or comments on this new business resolution? Mr. Brentley.
Yeah, I just have some concerns. Once again, when we tamper with naming, words are very important. And now if we're referring to it as it is Oliver Citywide Academy, what is that? And who determines what it is, what goes in there? So this concerns me. My biggest concern is that is this, who monitored this process? I see the naming committee is here, but who monitored the voting? If there was a total of, is it 13 people voted? And who determined who was eligible to vote?
Mrs. Fischetti, could you please address that?
Yes, Jocelyn Kramer from the solicitor's office was there to monitor it, and I was there on behalf of Dr. Lane to monitor it.
And how many out of the 13 were parents?
2 parents were invited and were unable to attend, Mr. Brentley, so of the 13, there were no parents.
Okay, who was there from the community at large?
I have a sign-in sheet. I don't recall names off the top of my head, but there were at least 2 community members, maybe 3, I cannot recall.
Look, I won't be supporting this. We have to be very, very careful. Over the last 5 years under the previous administration, they would wake up in the morning and decide they were going to take a name off of a building that's been there for years. Names are on buildings, they have a meaning. Those individuals made some kind of contribution to the city. And so we don't just take 13 people, no parents, and we're not even sure how many community folks, and change a name. And because we add citywide to it or academy, doesn't necessarily mean that it will perform as if it is an academy. And so I think we take this naming thing too lightweight. I can name 10 people who are still angry about the closing of Oliver. Had we reached out to them, would have loved to at least serve on a team, serve on a panel just to be associated with Oliver. And I don't think we did that. We obviously didn't do it with 13 people making a decision. So for what it's worth, again, you would not go up in some of these key communities and try taking the name off of their building because they won't tolerate it. And so you should not do it on the north side. You shouldn't do it for Oliver, and you shouldn't do it for any other community. Names should be taken very, very seriously. So I will not be supporting this item. I would love for it to go back and allow the community and the surrounding community to have some say-so into what this name is going to be about. Secondly, they should clearly know what the school is. I'm on the board, and I'm not even sure what we ended up with in terms of what's going to go in the building. We've been changing pretty much as we go along. So I won't be supporting it, and just want to remind my colleagues again, naming of a building is a very important process. The name on a building is very important, and we shouldn't take it lightly. Thank you.
Mrs. Fischetti.
I would like to clarify for the board that we did follow the board policy. The board policy does have criteria with regard to the school community naming committee, and the way the board policy reads, you can take a balloted vote with as few as 7 people. So I did want to just make sure that you know that we did follow the board's policy.
Let me just say that, and that may be true, but once again, this was one of those questionable items changed by the chair of that committee, Mr. Eisler, which I objected to, the changing of the process, just for that very reason. You do not allow something like this to change. You do not allow a handful of people to be able to make that kind of change. Secondly, I thought that there was some discussion about the changing had to take place while school was in session. This school has yet to be open. The new school is yet to be developed. And so we are changing it before the new student body and new staff actually gets in the building. And so I thought that, Mr. Weiss, are you aware of that policy? And wasn't there some kind of requirement that said that the student body and the school had to be up and running before we change? That's the process we use for the name that when we went through with Westinghouse.
I mean, to my knowledge, this policy that we're using has been the policy as long as I can recall. We have brought the naming process to schools this time of the year before. So I would have to tell you, from my perspective, I think the policy was followed. One may disagree with it, but I think the policy was followed here, and the building currently has David B. Oliver on it. So I think that should be said also, that I realize the citywide academy is new, but David B. Oliver is on the building now, so that is not a change.
Okay, thank you. But the final thing to remember is that we're adding the 2 additional names, which means a whole lot. The academy at one point was named after, I think, Westinghouse or a couple of other schools that had some pretty rough starts. And so that community could raise concerns, and that community has every right to raise concerns. But the bigger point, and Mr. Weiss, I'd like for your office, if you could, to get back to me on that policy to see if it was, in fact, supposed to be a school in place, up and running, not changing it prior to that school actually opening up.
We will provide a memo to you and the board on that issue.
Thank you.
I'm not certain of this, but I think that clause of the policy refers to new schools, and this is not a new school. This is the move of McKnocker from one building to another. But I would appreciate reading that in your memo, Mr. Weiss.
We'll address all of them.
Thank you. Seeing no additional comments, Mr. Weiss, may we please have a roll call?
Mr. Brentley?
No.
Ms. Scalise?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
The item is approved.
Are there any other items to be brought before the board at this time that require board approval? Mr. Brentley.
Yes, I have 2 items which I shared with board members in our executive session. The one is there's been some information that we have yet to really look deeply into, and that is concerning Northview Heights Elementary, which is open presently but scheduled to close at the end of this year. And I want to put a motion on the floor that we keep Northview open as is. The reason behind it is that Northview is a community separate and apart from no other community. They're sitting up high and away with its own large campus. To move and close the school and to now begin to transport or to provide transportation for students makes absolutely no sense. Secondly, there are other students in the Northview Heights community that are actually bused out to go to other schools. And if we're trying to watch our dollars, and if we're trying to be practical, and if we're trying to do the right thing, I think the only thing to do is to keep the school open until there's further discussion with the Pittsburgh Housing Authority, the Northview Heights Management, the Northview Heights Residents Council, and all parties that would be interested in adding some information to it. Secondly, still on Northview. No, still on Northview. Secondly, it was shared a couple of months ago at a public hearing by the president of the community that actually had the numbers that clearly showed that if we were to have all of the students who live in Northview that are of school age, that is from K to 7, if we had them all to attend Northview, that number would be close to, if not over 500 students, which means it would be just about zero transportation costs to the district. It is a no-brainer. And so I am recommending, and not only that, but the comment that was invited 2 weeks to the community to a transition meeting. I was there, and actually, when I got there, the president called me, and she was pretty much in a frantic. She said, well, Mr. Brentley, the meeting's kind of sort of canceled. They didn't know what was going on, and the principal was gone on leave for the rest of the year. And so she said, here we are being forced to move, and we have nothing, and nothing was put in place. We don't know. One example was given is she said there's a parent that has 3 children, and she actually got 3 notices where her children will be going to 3 different schools. A single mother with no transportation, that we're now putting a burden on her to try to get back and forth to participate and to be a good parent. And so it's just a mistake that I believe was made. I believe we would probably come out even saving a few dollars simply by allowing that there. At the very least, we should at least allow 1 year to hold as is until this discussion, until we can get a clear plan on what's happening in Northview. Finally, the brief discussion I had with management there dispelled the rumors, and when others a year or so ago put out the rumors that Northview is closing, it's not going to be there, there's nobody there, et cetera, it was just an absolute lie. I was told by management there that Northview has a close to, if not over, 93% occupancy. They've made major improvements to the community. They have a wonderful relationship with management and the tenants council, and so we have a wonderful opportunity to continue on, possibly saving a few dollars, but more importantly, not putting those students out there who needs this district the most. And those students are, and Doctor, if someone can help me with it, I know we have students from Africa, and I don't know if those were some of the Somali refugees in Northview. If someone knows where they're from, that would be very helpful. But I understand we have quite a few families there who are unable to speak English, and so consistency is important to them. If we had them all to attend Northview, we can have a separate room there to provide that specialized learning that they need to learn English, and it would provide a service to the district. So I will put in a motion on the floor, and it's not any major change. It is just to simply say to keep Northview open for at least 1 year until we get the necessary background information to make the right decision for those students in that community.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Brentley. And Mr. Brentley, are you finished with your discussion? Yes. Can we move on? Thank you. Mrs. Khaleesi.
Thank you. The first I heard of this was this evening. I do realize, Mr. Brentley, you did tell us that you sent the information out today, but I was at work and did not receive any of it. I'm very uncomfortable making a decision of leaving a school opened. I've been down this road, you know that, and it was a catastrophe then. It's a catastrophe if it's not done correctly now. But let me ask this. Can somebody tell me what the feeder pattern is for Northview? Is somebody able to tell me that?
Mr. Brentley is correct. There are enough children in the feeder to sustain the school. The difficulty is
but do you know what the feeder pattern is, Dr. French? I'm sorry.
I don't have the exact designation of the, I can give you the, yes, I don't know the exact street boundaries, but there are enough children in that feeder to sustain the school. The difficulty is that over half of those children choose not to send their children to Northview. Just as an example, for example, currently there are about 97 children who choose to go to Allegheny Elementary. We have another 58 children who choose to go to Allegheny Middle. We have, I believe, 36 who choose to go to Schiller, 22 to Manchester. So, you know, it would be a very, it would be a, I guess Mr. Brentley's recommendation would be to not allow the children to leave and have that choice. So that is true. If we denied that choice, there would be enough children in the feeder. The difficulty would be, I believe, to my knowledge, that would be the only school or feeder pattern that we do not allow families to have choice.
When you say choice, do you mean like going to a magnet school?
Yes, that over half the children do either apply to magnets or other means of moving out of the school.
Okay.
The majority of them do choose magnets. Ms. Scalise.
Thank you. This is, again, last minute. I apologize. I have nothing more.
Thank you, Mrs. Scalise. Dr. Hawley?
The problem, I agree with Mr. Brentley in this area because the children, the parents, go back to the parents, many of the parents in that community do not drive. Public transportation is very difficult to get in and out of Northview Heights. And I just wanted to ask a question. I don't know if she's here, but there are I was under the impression from the parents yesterday that there's a Head Start center in Northview. Where will those children go? Is there one?
The students, this is outlining, we can get you this again, Dr. Hawley, but the pre-K classrooms actually moved to Morrow.
Moved to where?
Morrow?
How are the parents going to get them there? Because they don't get transportation. How are you going to get them there? Yeah, come on, answer. You know, I'm here for you. You know what to say.
Carol Barone Martin, Executive Director for Early Childhood Education. Even though we're moving 2 classrooms into Morrow, parents have a choice, so they can go to any place that's convenient. Martin Luther King is on a bus line from Northview to King. So we really don't use feeder patterns for our preschool programs because they're not in every building. So we give parents choice, and there is, they can get there on a bus line if they don't have transportation.
And how are they going to are you going to give them bus passes? Oh, I'm sorry. Are you going to give them bus passes?
We've reduced the number of bus passes that we're using because we have found that many people that get public assistance get bus passes already through public assistance.
Oh, I never knew that.
It depends on what they qualify for, but many have qualified for it.
That was one of my other major concerns, and I really just found that out yesterday, that Northview had, now you're telling me 2 Head Start classes. So now mothers are going to have to get their children ready, get on a bus, and either go to King or to Morrow in order to have their children serviced for Head Start. This is such an isolated area, and there are so many people that actually live there that it's very difficult for me to understand why the district even closed the school, especially since the school was starting to do so much better academically. We saw some really significant growth there under the current principal and the current staff. So I'm a little bit taken back that the school is actually, I know they didn't make AYP, but I know where they were prior to the new principal coming and making the necessary changes academically. So I'm very concerned about the fact that parents are, number one, going to be really inconvenienced. I don't know what these schools are going to do if somebody gets sick, how the parent is going to get there quickly. If you know anything about the area, you'll know that it is very difficult to get in and out of there with public transportation. So if you're not getting a jitney or you don't have a car, you're going to be in bad shape trying to get back and forth to service your child from that community. And I do understand that many people do send their children to some of the magnet schools within the area, and I am not in any way, shape, or form trying to say that they should not be given choice. Everybody in the school district should have the ability to have choice. But I am saying the students that are staying there need to stay in the school that's within their neighborhood, because it is so difficult to get in and out of that community.
Mrs. Fink? Mrs. Azuda?
Questions, thank you.
Mr. McCray? Mr. Sumter? Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call vote, please? Mr. Brentley?
I just want to just quickly speak to the question, because it sounds bad when we suggest that we're taking choice away from parents. And I say to that, staff, be creative. You know, I'd like to see some creative thinking here in resolving some of these major issues. Sit down, look at the numbers, come up with some ways where those who are still attending other schools may perhaps still be able to attend, and those that are there, we can secure them. There's a wonderful opportunity to use Northview and that campus as English as a second language site, or as a regional site for the North Side for the Somali refugees or any other refugees in the city. And we can, why not specialize in that location for that? I mean, but we need to be a little bit more creative when trying to resolve these problems, because it clearly looks like, because public housing, because you're not property owners, because you may be a community of color, that there's just not as much time put into it to work out something. And I just say if you look at the wonderful, the beautiful campus up there, it's considered to be somewhat of a newer building. I don't think Northview is over 35 years old. Mr. Camarda, you probably know more than I do. I mean, I'm guessing in that range. So it is a newer building, not to mention the additions and the money that we put in it over the last 5 or 10 years. So it becomes the right thing for us to do. I also want to mention that I think one of my colleagues made the comment that they just received this information. Well, we've also received other information at the last minute, and board members were supportive in supporting it. One particularly is the item last month. The item was just put out on the table, and board members here voted in the affirmative for it. So the important thing to remember, if it's the right thing to do, I'm asking you to do it for that particular community. We all know that if this plan goes through, that most parents are going to get frustrated and unable to get their children back and forth to school, which could create a problem later on in terms of attendance. Final question is, Mr. Weiss, have you or this staff, Doctor, you as well, has anyone had any discussion with any individual, agency, or organization for the purchase, rent, or lease of the Northview Elementary School?
I have not, and there's been no such discussion to my knowledge that I'm aware of.
Doctor, are you aware of any discussions at all?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay. And that includes charter school and charter school applicant as well?
That does, that I'm aware of, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I just need to address a couple of things that you said, Mr. Brentley, forgive me, but I clearly hear your points about the Northview community, but just as a parent and a resident and a citizen of the city, I would never want the district taking away my ability to choose. And if you try to take away my ability to choose, then we're going to fight, honestly, in court. Number two, I would never suggest that the refugees or people who are English as a second language speakers and learners be isolated in one single building, both for the benefit of those children and the children who are first language English speakers and their exposure that they get to different cultures. I personally have a first grade child who has 2 ESL students in her class, and the way that the children who are native to America treat those children and are concerned for those children and communicate with those children is beyond description. And the benefits to my daughter by being exposed to children who are not native to America, I value tremendously. And I love that diversity, and I would never suggest that we take that away.
May I just clarify that? And I thought I made it clear about the question of choice. I mean, it is clearly an item that can awfully look bad and sound bad. I thought I clarified that. Secondly, for some of those students, and I'm not sure if they are Somali children, we presently have them where, Doctor? What school are they attending?
We have Arsenal right now where they'll receive service, and then it's always with the intention that it is parent choice that they do attend, but with the intent that we get them back as soon as possible into their regular feeder schools.
Okay. So we have them in a building now, in one location.
We have multiple ESL centers that parents can have the choice to attend for intensive service. Again, it's not a place where a child would be, for example, assigned as a feeder for them to remain.
Okay. Well, I want to make it very clear because I am not going to enter into the battle. The other thing, Ms. Shealy, I want to just, for me and board members, I think we have to find a way to think beyond our children. I am a father. I have children. But this is beyond just my personal family. And so I am listening to and trying to address the issues of those families and what was shared to me in that particular community. So I'm not going to get into no battle over this choice thing and trying to make it much more than it is. It's not a good decision. I believe the staff is competent enough and sharp enough to come up with some creative ways in addressing the issue. That's what I'm challenging them to do. I'm trying to relay to them what was relayed to me by the community, that this makes for simply a perfect fit. As Dr. Holly had pointed out, there's some sparks in terms of some achievement and how things are starting to move forward, and I would think that that would be our goal, to move on that, and not to always say, okay, that's it, we'll just change it. It makes sense to keep that community there. The community would be at a major disadvantage if we decide to close this and now force those parents to go scattered to 2 or 3 other schools. It just simply makes no sense.
I'm sorry, but I can't let that go. When I would never ask for anything for my children that I wouldn't ask for anyone else's children. And I only want the best for every child in this district. And I am a person who strongly believes in inclusion. And I'll go back to earlier experiences. I had a son who was fully disabled, And as much as he was able, he was included in typical classrooms. For his kindergarten year, when he was able to mobilize himself, he was in a fully included environment, because I believe that those children to whom he exposed himself and those children for his exposure both benefited from learning from the differences between cultures and the differences between people. And that refers back to the courageous conversations, and I think that's one of Mr. Singleton's biggest lessons, is that we are different, but yet we are still the same. And exposure to each other and learning about each other is very important in moving forward as a unified culture. And so I am not being narrow-minded and suggesting that my children get anything different. I am suggesting that I want the best for every child of our district, and that everything that I would think to benefit my kids, I think might benefit other kids too. Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Bentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Scalise?
No.
Mrs. Fink?
No.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
No.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
No.
Okay, the motion fails 4-4. A tie vote defeats the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Mr. Bentley, I believe you have a second item.
Yes, the next motion that I want to put on the floor is, first, I want to thank all the individuals who attended the public hearing, but this is a motion to simply start the start time for the schools, high schools, to start at 8 o'clock, and then you can move from 8. We need not go to the definition. We're thankful to the wonderful educators who attended the public hearing that shared important research about how important it is for students to have access to their rest, to be able to perform at their highest level in school. So the motion is to start school time at 8 o'clock, and also to reach out. There were at least 2 individuals who spoke at the public hearing, highly qualified educators who said, look, I am willing to serve. I will volunteer. I want to be a part in helping you to deliberate or make the decision or serve on a panel. I've suggested that in the past before, that this administration reach out to those individuals who are supportive of the Pittsburgh Public Schools, and we have yet to do that. So it was mentioned publicly last night. I would encourage this staff to reach out and to bring them to the table, and let's come up with a clear way of taking advantage of a later start time for our children. The final thing final comment on here is that they made the comment that after the research was made available, quite a few districts immediately moved to a later start time so that their students can benefit from a later start time. In Pittsburgh, we did the complete opposite. We moved in the other direction. So the motion is to direct the staff to start a scheduling of at 8 o'clock, and then they can build accordingly if they have to, but at least start the start time at 8 o'clock a.m. for high school students.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a
Second.
Mrs. Scalise?
Thank you. Again, another item that was brought to my attention when I arrived this evening. This one is dear to my heart. For years that I've been on this board, I have strongly suggested that we started high school at a later time. And good God, did I get slapped in the face with everybody that had a child that was in sports, because that would be the issue that would be affected the most if school was to start later. As far as the individual, and only one that I recall at the public hearing that I was at attendance and did keep all the documentation that was handed out that evening, is suggested that they would be more than willing to help. Never said at what cost. Never said they would be more than willing to come to the table and assist us pro bono. I'm offended when we sit around this table and because, I don't know, 15, 20 parents are upset about the time that we're changing things when they know that at the end of the day, is it a 15-minute time change or is it laying off 50 teachers? I'm a mother. I raised 2 children. They both went through this school. And when that school start time was expected for my child to be there, my child was not late. I did my job, I did my responsibility, and I got them to school. I understand they become nocturnal when they get high school age. Everybody knows this. Everybody understands this. But what, do we start school at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? And do at that point, is that going to be the complaint? They don't want to go at 3? Eventually, in life, they're going to have to deal with the demands of what comes their way. I'm appalled by this. We didn't change the times because, oh, we just felt like it one morning. Staff didn't come to us because of that. They came to us because we had serious financial issues and decisions needed to be made. Port Authority was not being cooperative, and I'll call it like it is. We did not have the money to afford these things. Staff did the best they could to figure out a way to financially answer to these issues. And if starting 10, 15, 20 minutes earlier was so horrible, then what are they going to do when they realize how many teachers are going to be cut? I cannot and will not support this. I have no problem if everybody wants to go back to the table and support us starting later, but all sports are to be gone, because that is the problem. That is truly the problem.
Thank you, Mrs. Khalidi. Dr. Hawley?
I'm going to agree with the parents and community agencies that came to the table yesterday. I agree with the many, many, many emails that I have received from both parents, doctors, sleep doctors, children, who also have voiced concerns about this early start time. But more so, it's from my experience. And I know that at 7:36, they're not going to be there. And if they have to catch a yellow bus and the yellow bus is gone, our attendance rate is going to go severely down. Again, it's going to affect the students who do not have the ability to get to school on their own. They don't have the money, and they're going to go back home. So I am very concerned about having this early start time. I said it before, and I'm going to say it again. We are not going to have a good attendance rate for our youngsters if the time is set too early. I totally agree with my colleague when he talks about them coming and still not being prepared for school at that early time. So now we got to worry about them coming early and then going to sleep when they get there, which some of them were going to do anyway. And now that you're telling them they have to be there at 7:36, it's already early, they haven't got enough sleep, they're going, and even those that get there may not be attentive to the work that needs to be done in the classroom. I am just very concerned about having these early start times. And the research is very clear that high school students do not perform well when they have to come to school early. Now, you could be as angry about it as you want to, but that's just the reality of it. And I'm not willing to do that to our children.
Thank you, Dr. Hawley. Mrs. Fink?
I think that the intent here is good, but I don't know that anyone has checked with Mr. Vassar, who is our Transportation Department Director. Our buses are linked. If you're on a yellow bus, it may be doing one run for a high school and another for an elementary or middle. I don't know how much Port Authority has negotiated with us. We've never gotten a price break from them, I know that. I really don't know how much this is going to, if it were to pass, what it was going to do to the rest of the transportation system, since many parts of it are linked. So without having a discussion with Mr. Vassar and looking at what our Transportation Department has probably already put in motion for next year, I think this is premature, and it's something that needs to be planned out. I too am a mom. I raised 6 kids, sent them all to Carrick High School, and Carrick had always started around 7:30, give or take a couple minutes. And I found what was really effective for nocturnal teenagers is cold water. It really causes them to rise and shine.
Thank you, Mrs. Fink. Mrs. Azuda?
No comment.
Mr. McCray?
I'm going to take a different approach. First of all, I have a very low opinion of researchers at Pitt because we had a researcher from Pitt that actually slandered this board. So I'm tainted in that way. But let me ask you this question. When you go to apply for a job, what's the first question? What time do I start? Whatever time it is, you're going to show up. What are we teaching the kids when we can say, hey, kids, go to a board meeting and whine and cry about getting up early and catching a bus in the dark, and they'll change the time for you? No, sorry. Can't agree with it.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Mr. Sumter?
I wholeheartedly agree that, to me, the time should be later for high school students. However, I don't agree with the tactic used to bring that about at this point in time. I say that because we just recently found out last week from the administration that they were going to change from their original position to a new position. In between tonight and that, we had a public hearing that provided information about the subject in general. I think it would be a courtesy to run that back through the administration for their consideration, knowing the position of the board, and allow them to arrive at a different position than the one they have chosen. If they were to choose to stick to that position after that, then I could see the board taking a necessary step to bring the desire of the board to fruition. Without knowing the impact, without knowing the difference between 8:15, 8 o'clock, 7:55, 8:10, which one would be more conducive? What the effect of 8 o'clock means? Does that mean all high schools have to abide by that? What if one high school might choose to start earlier, which one already is doing? Does that prevent them from doing it if you put a board policy in place saying you must, you shall start at this time? So because of that, at this point in time, I can't support the motion as only because of the timing of when it's being presented, and without the opportunity of having any dialogue with the administration regarding that. When I was made aware of going from 7:11 to 7:30 or 7:36, whichever the time was, it was thought to have been a step in the right direction, but I didn't feel myself personally that it was far enough. I need to know from the administration, why not? Why can't it be later? What's the constraints? Are there any? Why not move it to 10 o'clock or 10:30, whichever? sports shouldn't be the dominant factor. After-school activities, there's all kinds of things that happen beyond sports. I think when it gets to the point where that would be up to the board or the administration not to allow sports to dominate the decision-making. If that's the case, then that's not a priority. That if they go by the wayside but the kids learn, that's the bottom line. That's what you want. You want the education to come first. But it's all about compromising or collaborating to the point where you can get a win-win, partial win situation. It can't be ideal for everybody, but without having that conversation, it's difficult to make a decision at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. I would like to just state that I agree with a lot of what you said, and I believe that a huge driver to the start time is the cost associated with busing. So I would request, and again, I have no authority to make this request, but I'll ask anyway, that we, in our committee meeting, we have some type of presentation to help us understand this, the whys and whats behind that Mr. Sumter just brought up, so that there could be a full vetting of the start time for high schools. Mr. Brentley.
Yes, I just want to clarify some things. First of all, time is of the essence, so we don't have that time to sit around and we'll do this back to the staff, we'll bring it back, and then we'll come back. You know, we're talking about in less than 3 months, 3.5, 4 months or so, school will be starting, or at least the notices will be going out. Secondly, in terms of compromising and giving this to the going back and forth with the administration, we are directors. Our job is to direct the staff in this administration. We have more than enough information to show that we're simply on the wrong side of the issue. Clearly we are. And I do want to say that I do recall, Ms. Scalise, I want to say maybe 6 or so years ago, you were out front and one of the first ones talking about a late start time. And if you can recall, I also advocated as well and was very supportive of it because it made a lot of sense. And at that time, I had, I think, 3 kids in school. And so my challenge to some of the colleagues here that, Ms. Scalise, I think a nice way for you to look at this is say, well, wait a minute. I was out front. It takes this board 6 years to catch up. And I will support this because now they can clearly see that I was right, and you used the documentation of those who attended the public hearing to support your position 6 years ago. So technically, you can say the professionals that came to the public hearing last night, you were 6 years advanced, and you were ahead of them. The point being made here is that whatever and whenever someone comes to the realization that we're not doing the right thing, that we're smart enough, sharp enough to adjust and to move. It's almost as if this item it's a working document. It's a moving target from 7/11 to 7/36. 7/36 should be at 8 o'clock and wherever it goes from there. As far as Mr. Vassar, I believe that Mr. Vassar is a professional. And I believe that if this item is passed, Mr. Vassar and his staff would be able to make the necessary adjustment. They can clearly show us the impact on what it could be. It would be a wonderful opportunity for this administration and Mr. Vassar to reach out to those who attend a public hearing. Can we sit down and brainstorm? Here are our challenges. How do you, doctors from the University of Pittsburgh, how do you help us, or can you help us to get out of it? That's the part that we're missing here, and I just don't want us to continue to do things that runs students out of the district. The Reisenstein giveaway runs students out. The Northview closing will obviously run some parents out and possibly give up. And now with this early start time, we heard from the educator on this board who spent over 30 years in the classrooms and in the building, clearly telling us that if there's a time issue, some students will not go back and wait on the second bus. Some students may not call. They will simply go back home. If that number continues to multiply, we will be here next year again talking about another round of layoffs because we've lost another 300 or 400 students. I'm simply asking for folks to simply vote. It's the right thing. I believe our staff can pull this off. I believe that the professionals are ready, willing, and able to join us, and that's what we should be about, partnering with those who are of like minds and who are willing to kind of serve and help us, especially if we don't see where we should be. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Oh, Mrs. Scalise.
I really do not wish to drag this out, but Mr. Brentley, you're absolutely right. I was ahead of this a long time ago, and when I investigated everything and the reason why we weren't starting high school, and I'm not sure if you're suggesting high school or all schools, I mean elementary and all. I even came up with the suggestion of changing middle school and high school's times to accommodate for busing issues or those sort of things. And I am telling you, the issues were too large for us to deal with. It is not as simple as you're suggesting. I did my homework. I really did do it. I don't disagree with the reasoning, and I don't disagree with Dr. Holloway that students will be late and there will be some serious absenteeism. But we've changed it already back from what I understand. Staff has already gone back to what it is today. Am I correct?
There was a change made. Some schools will be starting later than they did this year, but some will still start earlier than they did this year. But there was an overall change back from the original proposal of 7-11.
Okay, the thing is that this is not something that we should be doing on a whim in any shape, way, or form. But more importantly, you know, I feel really bad for Mr. Vassar. He did make a presentation to all of us. He gave us the opportunity to ask us the questions. That man went, I mean, he just like went into every detail and every cubbyhole he could think of to figure out how to handle this, and he brought what he could to us. You know, I don't have a problem asking him to go back and look at this again. I do have a problem voting on something like this and expecting us in September for everything to just fly exactly the way you want. Not to mention, I'm not sure that there aren't contracts that could be in jeopardy trying to change the time without being negotiated or MOUs or worked out with unions. I think I have enough experience in that area that this could be an issue there too. So, I mean, it's going on 9:30 and we've spent 20 minutes on this subject, and I really don't wish to make it any worse.
Mr. Sumter.
Thank you, Ms. Scalise. Thank you, Ms. Shealy.
It's late. It's too late.
I'm still looking for the courtesy that's extended to the administration, because there has not been any feedback from the administration based on what was presented at the public hearing. There hasn't been any intimation as to whether or not the administration is willing to change even off of the initial change. I know it's hard to, when folks make up their minds and do things, it's hard to change minds. However, the issue would not have come forward if the time had not been changed in the first place. And prior to that, there hadn't been any motions to change any time or any discussions or presentations at any meetings, other than what I heard comments made from Mrs. Scalise that she was in favor of a later start time for teenagers. That has been mentioned maybe by Mrs. Calais or Mr. Fink or whoever more than once. However, it was felt, to my understanding, that the start times were okay other than the recent recommendation to change them earlier. There had been no board discussion that the present start times, or we hadn't focused any attention on that issue of start times until the recommendation came forward to change them earlier. There had been no discussion, no presentation at any education committee meeting that we should move them back because of the existing start times not working. I still feel, because it is within the purview of the administration, and I think based on this discussion tonight, based on the presentations made at the public hearing, that another change could be made. If not, even though we are the Board of Education, of which is responsible for setting policy, educating children, raising the finances to provide that, and providing the facilities to carry that out, I don't want to be a part of micromanaging the district, where it comes to the point where this board just dictates without any understanding of ramifications, of impacts, of cost or whatever, and just says do it without having an intelligent conversation about it first. I'm for later start times. I'm for whatever's going to help the high school kids get through this system and maintain and become promise ready, whatever. So I would mount up a campaign, if need be, to bring that about. But I just don't feel comfortable with, and even with the fact that Dr. Lane is not in town at this moment. She may be watching us on the internet, I don't know. We don't have her hooked up via telephone. To do that in her absence, even though she has folks to fill in for her, and perhaps carry that message back, I still would like to approach the superintendent with this concern or conversation and get her reaction to it before taking any other stronger measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. Mr. Rice, we have a roll. I'm sorry, Dr. Hawley.
Just very quickly, let me understand what you're trying to say, Mr. Sumter, because I can agree with that. I do believe that there should be a later start time. If I'm not mistaken, Westinghouse has a late start time other than 7:36. They actually start, the high school students actually, or somebody starts after 8 o'clock. I know the middle school students come at one time and high school students come at another time. But I do believe that a few years ago, before it was a 6 to 12, Dr. Crenshaw had gotten the board's approval to actually start the high school Westinghouse at 8:15 or 8 o'clock, something like that. And it was much better for those youngsters. Would there be a possibility that individual schools would be, high schools would be able to make that type of adjustment for their students if need be?
After listening to this, one of the things that I think it's really important to make clear is that all the great research that was brought forward, I want everybody to know we read all of that in advance. This was not a decision that was made lightly. We did not have the luxury, though, of making a decision in isolation of that information. So, I mean, the kind and generous people who did come and knowledgeable people who come are only coming from one perspective without having the burden of understanding our failure to act would land us as Philadelphia and Chester Upland and Duquesne. So I just want to make sure that we put that out there. We all sat around and studied the implications and had to weigh the decision and take great pains to say, what is the implication of our failure to act and try to get efficiencies? That being said, that does not mean we will not go back to the table. I believe I can speak on behalf of Dr. Lane, that we will come back and we can bring back the choices that we do have to make at different levels. If it's cost neutral and we can allow a school, just like with Perry, for example, we offered let's start later. They wanted to start earlier because it works for them. If a school is cost neutral and wants to start later, I do not see why we would not want to accommodate that. We can bring back the pros and cons like you did request and say, here are the things that if we choose to do this and cut into our deficit, add onto our deficit even further, here are the potential things that we might have to do, additional teachers that we may have to furlough, or additional programs that we may be able to cut. So I certainly welcome more people into that discussion, but I in no way want people to walk away understanding that we did not do our due diligence in researching about sleep. I love sleep. I love children to sleep. But I also want them to be able to be educated in a district that is sustainable and has the programs that we need to make our children promise ready and more successful for their future.
I understand all of that. I just was asking the question. If individual schools would want to have a later start time, would they be able to opt into having a later start time? The district didn't give any transportation to Westinghouse. Westinghouse got their transportation from somewhere else. So it's not going to impact this budget at all. Why?
The children from East Hills.
From East Hills.
The children from East Hills were
Yeah,
provided
they got
district.
2 buses.
District transportation.
Right, there were 2 buses that came from East Hills, or maybe just 1 bus. But I know that the majority of the buses came from the Homewood Children's Village. But I just wanted to make sure, ask the question, if they were able to start later, would they be able to do that with the district's approval?
I won't answer so long this time. Yes, they would be able to.
Thank you.
Just another question. I believe that everyone in the Westinghouse feeder pattern who is outside of the district's policy on transportation was provided transportation. The Homewood Children's Village provided transportation for children who were within the either 1.5 or 2 mile difference.
The district did provide, let me be clear and correct myself on this. The district did provide transportation from East Hills. The other students, I do believe, were given bus passes if they were 3 miles away. Well, I think they gave them 3. Okay.
If that were the case, Dr. French,
They did
I
get
would
bus
really
passes.
appreciate that, if whether you look into that, because that would imply that we are violating our own policy.
What?
I believe that any children who is
I'm not
outside-
talking, don't get me confused. I'm not sure of how many miles. I know some kids got bus passes.
okay.
Don't go back and look for them, because please. Some children got bus
No, it's
passes,
1.5 for
and,
middle school,
but
2
very
for high
few children got bus passes. The majority, a lot of students then were given, I know the Homewood Children's Village did provide at least 2 buses to the Lincoln-Larimer area and 2 buses to the Lincoln-Limington area, which is what the children were used to getting anyway when they went to Belmar. So I just...
Mr. Brentley.
My final comment here. Comment was made that, the early start time works with Perry. That's true, but the majority of those students are from the north side. And so it's a little easier to get back and forth. It's 5:30, 6 in the morning to start class at 7:11. Secondly, it's important that we consider some silly things like being consistent. We are changing the start time for the other schools, but Kappa remains at a later start. And Kappa, we know, is one of the high achieving schools, very, very high grades and scores and a whole bit. And so something that tells you a little something in terms of a later start, if it's 8:15 for Kappa. Well, if it's good enough for Kappa and we can see the improvements, we should also make that available for other students. And so when there's no consistency as to start time, knowing its benefit, that's not being or the term we often use, transparent, from a board or a board of directors. And so we need consistency in start time. With the early start time, we clearly can see that it would pretty much impact those schools that have students that are coming from across the city. That's the Obama, that is also Kappa, and any other schools that draw students from across the city. In some cases, it could impact the wonderful diversity that some of these schools are experiencing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Are there any additional comments? Mr. Weiss, may we please have a roll call?
Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Mr. Khaleesi?
No.
Mrs. Fink?
No.
Mr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
No.
Ms. Shealy? No. Mr. Sumter?
No.
Mrs. Azuda?
No.
Okay, the motion fails 2-6.
Are there any additional items that need to be brought before the board for a legislative vote?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Shealy. I want to, and I'm not going to try and keep you here so that you can start getting out sleeping bags.
Yeah, I think so.
During the last legislative meeting, I inadvertently voted in the personnel section for the entire section. I did so out of my own negligence of not knowing exactly how the process worked. And I'm not going to use that as an excuse. So what I did is I asked the solicitor, how can I rectify this problem? Because I'm very concerned about my vote being counted correctly. So I am basically asking to move to reconsider the vote for a certain section of the personnel section for the April board meeting, legislative meeting. And I'll give a motion. I move to reconsider the vote on all of the items on Addendum A and items 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 14 in Section B of Addendum B to the April 25th, 2012 Human Resources Report. I voted affirmatively for Addendum A and Addendum B to the Human Resource Report.
Second.
Okay. Mrs. Khaleesi?
Point of clarification. So given that this has been brought back to the table and second, which now means it will definitely go through a vote again.
Let me just explain how this works.
Yeah, forgive me. Go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but this is a little unusual, but Dr. Hawley's correct. This is the way this has to be done to achieve what she has expressed. There's a motion to reconsider the items that she has enumerated. If that is approved, then there will be a vote on those items.
Okay.
If this motion is defeated, the vote that occurred in April will stand as recorded.
Okay. So my point or my question was going to be, if, let's assume for the sake of conversation, just so I get an answer to what I'm thinking, the motion passes and we re-vote on these two items. Mr. Eisler doesn't happen to be here this evening. If when he comes back next month, he feels that his vote was erased when he initially made it, can he bring this back up again?
I do not believe he can. I mean, there is a closure process to these reconsiderations. The reconsideration has to be done at the next legislative meeting in a body like this. There is no provision in the rules for a reconsidered item to be again reconsidered. So there's a closure to this process. So he's not here. he will live with the results.
Thank you.
Have Dr. Hawley vote?
That's not how it works. You cannot change your vote. A person, once they vote, cannot change their vote. The only way this matter can come before the board again for reconsideration, and Dr. Hawley can vote differently because she did vote in favor of this item, so she can and has made this motion because she voted with the prevailing side. This is the only way this can be done. You cannot change a vote once the vote is taken. So this is the only way it can be done. If the motion to reconsider is approved, you'll have to vote again. If the motion to reconsider is defeated, the matter is ended.
Can we move off of the motion to reconsider first? Can we vote the motion to reconsider first?
I have some questions.
But she has to go around and make sure everybody else.
Cannot ask questions on the items right now. We need to vote on the motion to reconsider. Once we if that passes, then we can have discussion on the items. And that's what I was getting to. May we have a roll call? Oh, God help me.
Really brief, you know, I'm fast. But on what Mrs. Scalise said, now, if anybody that votes in the affirmative now, next month decides to reconsider, we can't do that. Okay, just want to verify that.
Please have a vote on the motion to reconsider, Mr. Weiss.
Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Scalise?
No.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Okay, so the items that Dr. Hawley has enumerated, which I have on my sheet here, is Addendum A from last month, Addendum A, and items 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 14 of Section B of Addendum B are now before the board for a vote. Are those the correct items, Dr. Hawley? Yes. Okay, so just so you're clear, the board, when appropriate, will vote on those items.
May we have discussion on those items, please? Mr. Brentley?
I would like all of my comments to be brought forward from my April meeting concerning the questionable demotion of an individual and all of those comments that I made at that time.
That's not in the, am I reading this right? That's not in what you're considering right now. Okay. Mrs. Scalise? Dr. Hawley?
I want to be very clear that my opposition was not, and I wanted to say this last month, is not about individual people, but with the process in which this has been done. I am very concerned that these positions, even though they may not, people are getting paid the same amount of money, they are positions that give them more latitude and more authority within the district. And these positions should have been posted. And we've had this conversation about the district doing this, even when I was a principal and I represented the Principals Association. And here I am again as a board member, and still the same activities are going on. And secondly, I'm looking at the closing and without having them posted and then interviewing for the best candidate. We don't know who the best candidate is because these jobs were just given to people. And in a time when we are laying off teachers, to open up new administrative positions, I just think is appalling. I don't care if they're coming from a grant, and some of them didn't come from a grant. One of them is actually paid out of general funds. I just find it appalling that we ask teachers to sacrifice, but we are making jobs, and I shouldn't say making them up, but basically that's what it is, because I don't even know what some of these jobs are actually going to do. Because unlike today, we actually received a description on all of the new positions that we voted on today. That's why I could vote affirmatively on many of them. But we have no job description on these jobs that you posted for April 25th. Those are my major concerns. Then fourth, there was absolutely no diversity in any of these jobs. So somebody is going to tell me that there are no people of color that could have actually been promoted or given the opportunity to have these positions. I have a problem with that.
I'm sorry, Mr. No.
Okay. One reason that I was in support of the reconsideration is that, unfortunately, last month, our executive session time was cut by 30 minutes. Had we had that additional time, perhaps this conversation might have come forth because it is personnel. We did talk extensively about one individual and their overtime that they may have been earning or not. One individual as opposed to a host of individuals that could have probably been discussed, but because it wasn't afforded that opportunity, that was one of the main reasons for supporting the reconsideration. Sometimes we get rushed back in the board office, boardroom, and don't get a chance to fully elaborate or discuss concerns we might have for rushing out here trying to be on time rather than taking our time and having the time to discuss these matters. I just wanted to put that forward as another reason for the reconsideration from my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. Mr. Bradley?
Yes, I just want to say to Dr. Hawley, we can clearly see the importance of having an educator on the board, your ability to share and give us insight as to past practices. I've sat on this board 13 years, and it just goes on and on and on. I don't know if it's deliberate, but I can tell you it is awfully frustrating when you see something like that happens, and then at the same time, in less than 45 days, we will be asked to put on our game faces as we give notices to those individuals that we are laying off. Clearly, there was some preference used in this selection process that was not transparent. It was not open and available to all. And so that's the frustrating part, because the public will then look to the 9 board members here when, in fact, what's given to us by the staff or their recommendations, and 99% of the time we take as being thoroughly researched, and we often embrace it, support it, and vote for it. So I just want to say thank you so much, and I hope that you continue to use your 30-plus years in the classrooms and in the buildings to help us to understand. Normally, that item would have went under as a normal transaction. If you dare to question it, you are troubled, or you're ruled out of order, or your microphone is turned off or turned down, or you would get some to go through some ridiculous body languages while you're speaking, even though you're there advocating for the highest and best employee to be hired and to be a part of this wonderful district. So I just want to say thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Ms. Spolar, did moving these people into central office in any way help or prevent furloughs of teachers?
So I do not have the prior month's agenda in front of me, but I know that, at least I believe, a number of these positions, which were supplementally funded and therefore at no cost to the district, directly prevented an equivalent number of furloughs. So yes, were these positions to be voted against, it would result in furloughs, additional furloughs.
Thank you. Seeing no additional comments from the board, may we please have a roll call, Mr. Weiss?
This is a vote on these enumerated items, just as if you were voting on them last month. So, Mr. Brentley?
No on all items.
Mr. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
No on all items.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
I believe that I voted yes last month, and I will affirm that yes vote again.
I'll be voting on yes for the items on Addendum A and no on items 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 14 of Addendum B to the April 25th, 2012 Human Resources Report.
Yes.
Result from last month, but the vote will be reflected in the minutes of this month. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Are there any additional items to be brought before this board that require a legislative vote? Are there any announcements to be brought before this evening that do not require a legislative vote? Mr. Brentley?
Yes, I just want to make some suggestions. It's getting late. There's a survey that I received today, and Dr. French, as a suggestion, as a parent, I would hope that this district would want to get a high response to our surveys, but I'm going to point out that when you put at the bottom of it that this is funded or it's a part of the district, I think it should be an independent agency or organization providing this. This is one of those things that sometimes parents have some concerns about if their message is actually ever heard. And I think actually on the bottom, we put down here that the district's parent survey is funded by foundations that believe in Pittsburgh Public Schools. That concerns me. Foundations are great partners, but in some cases recently have been involved with some may be perceived as some political activities, which could, I think, harm the final income. So as a suggestion, this is a perfect item that we should use for an independent agency, allow them to put the information together and then share it with us. Secondly, I want to, Dr. French, just present you with the check from Sodexo. This is from the Pittsburgh Public Schools Take a Father to School Day. As you know, we were one of 3 grand prize winners, and with the grand prize winner, we receive a check for $4,000. I have it here.
Hey, I'm here first.
Well, don't worry. I already tried to put my name in, and it doesn't really look too right. So, but I just wanted to pass that on. And finally, Doctor, we often hear everybody talking about our students and being promise ready, and are you ready, and to move on and so on. Can I suggest that we find somebody and search the world high and low to add into that promise-ready curriculum for our students who are college-bound a course on packing when you go to college, a course on airport etiquette, Some will be traveling along the airport. But packing, it is important that it's not necessary to take all 57 stuffed animals.
Sure it is.
Some you can leave behind. There are little secrets that you can teach on how to pack your shoes and how you can roll things up to get more space. There should be a section that we should teach on pictures, a virtual tour of some of these college dorms. When these kids see what they have to work with, it's almost the size of a jail cell. And so that means you cannot get a full-size television in there. And so you have to do some things. Please, find a way. I've had some personal experiences, and I'm not going to go into it, but I'm sure that there are other parents who had similar experiences. We can easily put a segment into their preparation to any student who's going away for school, some of the things they should do, what papers they should pack, knowing and having access to the financial aid when you get on and off campus, making the final call before you get on campus so that you won't move up there and find out that there's a missing part, so now you have no place to stay. You know, the list goes on, but I am certain somebody can come up with a real cute way of sharing these things and making sure that when our kids move out to be promise ready, that they are packed promise ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Mrs. Khaleesi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I promise I won't keep this but a few seconds. I went to Brashear and went through the EET program that was taking place there and was just unbelievably impressed. And then I went to King, and I was, if not equally impressed, more impressed. I don't want to say one did better than the other because I wouldn't dare do such a thing, okay? But the work that is going on in both these schools and the dedication from everybody, from the lunch lady to the custodian to the teachers to the administration and the staff, is just unbelievably remarkable. And what is even more remarkable is the ability to just stop any student in the hall, ask any question, and the way they respond is with such great respect and with knowledge. I mean, they actually, there's knowledge going on. There's a lot of educating going on, and I think that staff needs to be commended. I didn't have the opportunity to do that last month, and I feel terrible that it's this late tonight, and I'm hoping that they'll know about it, but they do need to be commended, and I will be stopping by again, and I would hope that all of you would join me in appreciating the work that's being done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Khaleesi. Dr. Hawley? Okay. Mrs. Azuda?
Yeah, I just want to real quick say, Brashear had a special thing where they had all the students stand up and declare what college they were going to, and it was absolutely phenomenal. Over 200 students were able to participate, and like all the Slippery Rock students got up together, all the pit. By the end of it, they were all cheering for each other. It was absolutely wonderful. The Brashear ninth graders and the Langley ninth graders were there together, so it gave them another opportunity to interact and also to see the results of some of our students going on to college. So it was a great day at Brashear when they had the students declare what college they'd be attending, and I just wanted to share that real quick. One other thing, I did attend the Westinghouse production of Fame. It's the first school play they had in 10 years. And it was so much fun. They did a really fun job with it. So I just wanted to give them a shout out too. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. Mr. McCray?
I'll be brief. Yeah. We're going to graduate our students this year, 12th graders. Well, 4 years ago, we graduated the first Promise Scholars, and they graduated college this year. I have one at home. So I would like to remind anyone that's watching, if you know somebody in that senior class, invite them to come to the graduation of their respective schools this year. I'm putting out, I don't care whether you guys like it or not, I'm putting an open invitation to those guys to come because I want to recognize them and let the students that are graduating this year know that in 4 years, they're going to be doing the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. I guess the halls need to get ready for a few extra guests. Mr. Sumter.
Hey, I got y'all beat on that one.
What?
I'm already in my room.
Mr. Sumter.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Always remember to invest in our children's future by contributing to the Pittsburgh Promise, and also before the end of the month, if you contribute to Carnegie Library, your contribution will be matched. I wanted to give a shout out to Arsenal 6-8. Today they had a ceremony of whirligigs. It's a Memorial Day celebration, and today it was dedicated to Shauna Northcutt, who was the mother of Montel and Chantel Austin. It's a very stirring ceremony. They have dancers, they have poems, presentations, and it's basically to remember loved ones that have gone on ahead of us, and it's a way of paying tribute to them on a Memorial Day. Like I say, there was dancers, dedications, candlelight service, and they invited me to address the students with an inspirational message, so I wanted to give them a shout out for that. I want to thank Principal Patty Camper, social worker Monica Tillman, and Wanda McDavis for inviting me. But it was a very stirring ceremony. I attended last year and this year, and if you get the opportunity next Memorial Day, stop on by Arsenal. What they have now is they look like chalkboards, and there's about, I would say, at least 8 of them that are lined up on the fence on the corner of 40th and Butler. And every day they wipe these chalkboards off, and there's probably about, I'd say maybe 5 or 6 lines on each chalkboard. They wipe them off each night, each day, the next day. And the theme is, what do you want to do before you die? And the chalkboards are filled in every day. At first, people were putting some little prank statements, but now it's like, I want to meet LeBron James, I want to do such and such, and it's almost like a bucket list if you look at it, about things that kids want to do. But either the kids or people in the communities, there's big pieces of chalk, so anybody can go in and fill them in. But every day, they're filled in. They wipe them off each day. Next day, they're filled in again. But anybody riding past there can see them. They're on display at this point. But a very moving ceremony. You can look up there's background about whirligigs. There's a novel about it. And it's the theme of their ceremony that they have each day in honor of those who have gone on before us, and it's their Memorial Day celebration. So shout out to Arsenal 6-8.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. As you were speaking, you mentioned the library and gifts being matched. Their day of giving with the Pittsburgh Foundation is Thursday, May 31st, starting at 12:01 a.m. So contributions to the library will be matched by the Pittsburgh Foundation's Pittsburgh Gives platform. And this is on the 31st, and this is an email from the library. But Mr. Sumter says it's up to the 31st. But I would also like to mention the Give to the Promise, as Mr. Sumter always does. With that, may I have a motion? Do I have to do all in favor? I'm sorry. All in favor? Signify by saying aye, please. Aye. Opposed? Same sign. This meeting's adjourned. I would like to call the meeting of the May 23rd, 2012 meeting of the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver. May I, please. Intermediate unit to order. Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call?
Mr. Bradley?
Here.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
I'm here.
Mrs. Fink?
Here.
Dr. Hawley?
Here.
Mr. Rice is absent. Mr. McCray?
Here.
Ms. Shealy?
Here.
Mr. Sumter? Present. Mrs. Zuda?
Here.
8 members present.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. I would like to call your attention to the minutes from last month. Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions?
So moved.
Khaleesi, Fink? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign? The minutes are approved. I would like to call your attention to the Committee on Education. Are there any questions that were not addressed at agenda review?
What'd she say?
No. Seeing none, Mr. Rice, may we have a roll call?
Mr. Brennan? Lazy?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Holly?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Report's approved.
Let's move to the committee report on business that is before us, let's move to the committee report on business that is before us, submitted by Mrs. Khaleesi, Business Chair, and Mr. McCray, Finance Chair, and their committee. Before us this evening is the 2012-2013 budget adoption for the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit. Are there any questions or comments on the budget that were not addressed at agenda review? Mrs. Khaleesi.
I just want to make clear to the board that the audit is in here and the budget. It has been gone through the Business and Finance Committee thoroughly, and we do recommend it. Thank you.
No, Mr. Weiss, I did not have to read the resolution for the budget, did I? I did not think so. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, Mr. Weiss, may we please have a roll call?
I want to make sure the minutes reflect this includes the adoption of the budget for the intermediate unit. Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Holly?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Report's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. There is no personnel report for the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit this evening. Are there any other items to be brought before this board at this time? Now, Mrs. Khaleesi. All in favor? Aye. Adjourn, same sign, opposed, same side? This meeting is adjourned.